It's chaos.
It's a different type of Sunday scary.
It's your newest obsession.
It's Dirty Driving, a Formula One podcast.
We're the Hornsby sisters. I'm Katie.
And I'm Megan.
Oh my God. I cannot believe we are finally sitting down to talk about what happened in the race this weekend, because Saudi Arabia was hot, both on the track and off the track. So much happened before lap 16 that we felt like we needed a nap before the next 34 laps, which is wild considering it was a much calmer start than anyone had anticipated. This weekend we witnessed the penultimate round of the 2021 season, and it was a lot to process. 2 red flags, 3 standing starts, Max and Lewis barreling through the newly built Jeddah circuit, going wheel to wheel. They touched a couple times, the FIA being consistently inconsistent, headsets thrown to the ground, debris everywhere, and a 3rd consecutive Lewis Hamilton victory. The inaugural Formula One race in Saudi Arabia was a heartache of epic proportions that left many fans and drivers asking questions on if the track needs to be tweaked to prevent another dumpster fire of a Sunday. With less than 4 months until we return to Saudi Arabia, I do not think we're going to stop talking about this track anytime soon. Lewis Hamilton's Sunday win was his 103rd victory. Max Verstappen took 2nd place, now tied for the record for the most podiums in a single season. He has yet to finish in P3. All of his podiums have either been 1st or 2nd place. In 3rd place was Valtteri Bottas, who took a podium in his 100th start at Mercedes, also his 2nd to last start with the team. This week also marked a 100th consecutive Q3 appearance from our favorite coffee drinking Finn. Let's get into the weekend breakdown with Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And before we hop into the drama of practice and qualifying, I have to give you guys a tire saga update because it continues. Pirelli released a report on the tires post-Qatar investigation. And if you recall, in the Qatar GP, 4 drivers suffered front left tire failures. We had both the Williams, Norris in the McLaren, and Bottas in the Mercedes. So it's still an undergoing investigation, but they released their initial conclusions. Pirelli said that the origin of the problem is mainly due to the amount of time these tires were run on the curbs, and that the heavy demand of this damaged the tire construction and led to a loss of pressure in the internal sidewall, which consequently caused the structure to collapse after several seconds. The manufacturer will continue to investigate. It's not due to any production defects, luckily, so we actually didn't see any issues with tires this weekend. But following the race, Lando Norris said that the failures were quite dangerous and just shouldn't happen. And that brings us to this week, and we started in practice. We saw Hamilton and Bottas strong in both FP1 and FP2. In FP2, we saw Charles Leclerc crash into the barriers at turn 22-23 in the last 10 minutes of FP2, and he was likely going about 150 miles per hour. Thankfully, he climbed out of the car and was cleared by the medical professionals, and the chassis took the brunt of the impact. He would go on to qualify the 4th fastest to start P4 in the race. Again, the crash looked bad, but the chassis and engine were okay. Lots of work for the team to get that car ready, but he was able to run in P3. We knew Mercedes was going to be fast, and they were. Again, they took the fastest for both FP1 and FP2. The track itself is fast. It looks really fast on TV, and let me tell you, this track was not forgiving. We knew it wouldn't be, but holy shit, there is no room for error here. Which leads us to qualifying, where we saw Max Verstappen hit the wall on his flying lap in Q3. So Max went fastest in the first 2 sections, narrowly missing walls a couple of times, and then he found some horrible understeer in that final corner where Verstappen corrected but slid into the wall, and there were some questions over whether we needed to change that gearbox, which would have resulted in a grid penalty. Luckily, we did not have to do that. And Verstappen was very optimistic. He said, it was generally a really good qualifying. It shows that the car is quick, and let's see what we can do to win the race. It would have been the qualifying lap of the entire season and would have allowed Verstappen to prevent Hamilton from taking his 4th consecutive pole position at a new track, which resulted in a Mercedes front row lockout. But Verstappen would need a spectacular start to find pace with these silver arrows on Sunday. And now we can get into the real drama of the week, the Sunday scaries. We always start off the Grand Prix race recaps with the race start, and this weekend we were blessed with 3 race starts. So with the official race start, Hamilton and Bottas front row with Max in P3. The Mercedes had a clean getaway with Max Verstappen chasing them. Perez and Leclerc went wheel to wheel. All in all, it was a very clean start and the best possible outcome for Mercedes. We saw that close call between Perez and Verstappen with a Perez lockup into turn 1, where he almost went into the back of his teammate. Luckily, that did not happen. For our second restart on lap 15, Verstappen and Hamilton were on the front row, and Hamilton got the better line into turn 1. Valtteri locked up and lost his position, and Ocon was able to get through and up into first place. Max chose to go off track to get around Lewis, squeezing Hamilton and then eventually getting overtaken by both Verstappen and Ocon, who then eventually got overtaken by both Verstappen and Ocon. Max was off the track when he gained that advantage, so he was forced to give that position back. Before he was able to even do that, the race would be red flagged due to a crash in the first sector, which I'll talk about in a minute. Our third start of the race was on lap 17, where we had Ocon, then Hamilton, and Verstappen. And before we get to the restart, we have to mention that the FIA was negotiating with Red Bull and offered them a deal due to Verstappen's overtake on the previous restart of lap 15. So if you're not aware, you cannot go off track to gain advantage, and normally that results in a 5-second penalty and giving the spot back. And instead, the FIA hopped on the radio with the Red Bull pit wall and basically offered them a deal for a third place start. It was poor communication here. Michael Massey messed up the deal the first time he offered it and had to clarify. He said, I'm going to give you the opportunity to start from grid position 2. And Red Bull was like, let's have a minute to discuss. Red Bull came back on and said that we want to clarify the order. We'll take it if we're starting behind Ocon, but not Hamilton. And Michael Massey came back and said, no, you'll be in P3 behind Hamilton in P2. Red Bull was like, we need another minute to discuss, and ultimately agreed to avoid a summons to the stewards, which then could have resulted in that 5-second penalty. So finally, let's get to the restart. We had Hamilton and Ocon touch going into turn 1, where Verstappen and Ocon were both able to get in front of Hamilton. And then we went racing. 3 starts, 3 different drivers as P1, and 2 saw Max Verstappen leading into turn 1, and 1 saw Hamilton. You might be wondering why we had so many restarts, and that's because we had 2 red flags in the race. The first is when Mick Schumacher went into the wall at lap 10 at turn 21 and 22, the same spot Charles Leclerc went into the wall in FP2. It started with a yellow flag on the session to remove Schumacher's car, but then the FIA decided that they really needed to get a crane out on track to fix the barriers, and so they red flagged the race at lap 13. During the yellow flag, we saw both of the Mercs dive into the pit lane to get fresh tires, and the impact of this red flag was that Verstappen got a free tire change because under red flag rules, tires can be changed in the pit lane. Lewis Hamilton was complaining about how it wasn't fair because Red Bull went with the risky move to stay out and gamble. I personally am not sure where I stand on changing tires during a red flag. Part of me says it's okay, and part of me says that it should really only happen if there's a weather change or if there's damage to the tires. In lap 15, causing the second red flag and third restart of the race, we saw a crash between Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Nikita Mazepin, and George Russell. Sergio Perez was the one who was spun around by the Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc. Perez didn't think he was there or anyone was there or that anyone could be there between him and the wall, and Leclerc simply did not have enough space and Perez didn't see him. Perez would attempt to make it back to the pit lane, but it was not possible, so he retired the car. Leclerc would go on to finish 7th. Both Charles and Sergio would be summoned to the stewards after the race, but no further action was needed as neither driver was predominantly to blame. Between Russell and Mazepin, Russell was taking avoiding action from Sergio Perez, where he managed to slow down and avoid him, but Mazepin was powerless to avoid hitting the back of the Williams through one of Jeddah's many blind sections. So both of them had to retire and did not finish. Russell commented after the race how unsafe the track is and needs some tweaks to make sure that it's safe for the future. He said it seemed pretty inevitable. You go around a turn 2 that's fairly wide and open, cars can go side to side, but then it really funnels in and goes pretty narrow pretty fast. Moving on to our favorite two, Max and Lewis and Max. In lap 37, we saw Lewis have DRS and get around Max on the pit straight into turn 1. Verstappen eventually goes off track yet again in turn 1 after a tight wheel-to-wheel fight with Lewis Hamilton. Verstappen does not yield at all and gets in front of Lewis again off track, and he takes back first place. Once again, you cannot gain advantage off track, so the stewards would review and give Max a 5-second penalty and 1 penalty point on his license for this incident. That 1 penalty point would put him at 5 for this 12-month period. Lewis got on the radio and said he's fucking crazy, man. And again, Max Verstappen has this headspace, has this mindset that he is going to yield or he's going to crash. He is going to risk it all or he's going to take it. And not everyone is a fan of that kind of driving, and surely not everyone supports that kind of driving. It has caused a lot of the drama this year, and luckily we haven't seen anything worse come from it. Later in the lap, Max is told by Red Bull to give the position back, and just as Red Bull tell Verstappen to do so, Hamilton runs into the back of the Red Bull. He damages the front wing, luckily not enough to need a pit stop, and he actually finishes the race with that damaged front wing. This incident was investigated post-race, where both of the drivers were summoned to the stewards. Verstappen was given a 10-second time penalty and 2 points on his license, so he's up to 7 now. And ultimately, the stewards decided the sudden braking by the driver of car 33 was determined to be erratic and hence the predominant cause of the collision, and hence the standard penalty of 10 seconds for this type of incident is imposed. So he braked suddenly, which resulted in Lewis Hamilton nicking the back of his car, and he received a 10-second penalty for that. Luckily, he was far enough ahead of Bottas that he kept his second place. On lap 42, Max finally gives the position back to Lewis at the end of the DRS zone and went for it on the inside to take back P1 into turn 7. This was when the 5-second penalty was given to Verstappen for the advantage gained in the first turn of lap 37. So again, going off track to gain a position. In lap 43, Lewis would be able to get around Verstappen for the last battle of the race. There were some questions on whether or not Max gave Lewis the position back or whether his tires were going off at the end. He was on mediums. We heard him on the radio at lap 46. Unfortunately, they were unable to stop for softs to get the fastest lap, or they would lose that second place to Ocon. In the post-race interview, Max Verstappen said that once he knew about the penalty, there was no reason in fighting anymore because the tires did not have the pace. It was a wild race. Ultimately, Max and Lewis ended in P1 and P2. Lewis secured the fastest lap with a broken front wing, and Max took home driver of the day. He had little desire to celebrate and left the podium before any of the shenanigans could really take place. He would later say in an interview when asked why he didn't celebrate, there was no champagne and it wouldn't have been that fun. And I mean, we get it. We love champagne. Valtteri passed Esteban Ocon in the last meters of the final lap to take P3 in his 100th start for Mercedes. Ricciardo was in 5th with Gasly in 6th. Leclerc and Sainz swapped back and forth but came home together yet again. Antonio Giovinazzi picked up 2 points for Alfa Romeo, and Lando Norris grabbed the last point for McLaren. Okay, Megan, let's get into our race rundown.
Absolutely. Okay, Katie, I am going to start it out hot. Just go right in there for it.
Okay.
Max Verstappen mentioned in his Driver of the Day interview, we're going right to the end of the race, that Formula One has become about penalties. So, Katie, is Formula One about penalties and not racing?
It sure feels like it after this race. I feel like there were a lot of penalties handed out. Max actually was responsible for 3 race incidents and received a 5-second penalty, a swap back place, and then after the race received an additional 10-second penalty. So it honestly might have been a record for the amount of penalties handed out to one single driver in one race. But, I mean, they were deserved. And so it did feel like a penalty-heavy race. It has felt like a FIA-heavy last couple races. Helmut Marko even mentioned that he said that he doesn't think the treatment between Red Bull and Mercedes is even in terms of penalties given. I don't know. I think it's easy to say that it seems penalty heavy because we saw 3 from Max Verstappen. We didn't see any from Mercedes. I get where Helmut Marko's coming from, but they're deserved. And I don't know. I feel like this race was about penalties and making sure that things were addressed in the right way they needed to be addressed. But Formula One is still about racing, and if you race right and you race correctly, then you don't see penalties.
I would have to agree that this race felt so penalty heavy. I don't know. I think there's 2 reasons why I felt that way. There were so many so quickly, like they were bunched together, that just like the commentators weren't sure what infraction Max was like swapping positions for. I think he actually swapped positions an additional time that he didn't need to. He swapped twice because Red Bull told him, and then there was that additional swap. So then it felt like there was even more penalties. My biggest issue with the penalties, and this is, I would argue that some of the frustration stems from this, is they just take forever to actually be investigated, so things seem to drag on longer than they need to. Obviously, we need them to be able to analyze everything, and it's not like in a race that was this chaotic at a new track that was a dumpster fire, they were going to be able to look at all the data in race. Not going to happen. But all this, like, we'll give you a decision later. We're going to investigate it. We're looking at all the data. Makes things feel way worse.
It makes it feel like the FIA is just making it up as they go along.
There were points, and I know we're going to get to them, where I did feel like they were just, Michael Massey was out here creating things. I don't believe Helmut Marko is right. I think he looks at it through a lens of Red Bull is beyond reproach and they never do anything wrong. He literally said last night that the data doesn't show that Max hit on the brakes. And the FIA looked at the data and they were like, he did though. These numbers do not lie.
The numbers are not lying. We are being fair. We are being just.
I think Helmut Marko has to, I will say that his greatest asset is that he is a diehard, loyal Red Bull fan, almost to a fault, and will fall on that sword. And that is the hill that man will die on. I mean, he looks like he's going to die every race. So, yes, I'm going to just say that I think he blew it out of proportion, but this race was a dumpster fire, and, I mean, the FIA looked like clowns.
They did, and this kind of leads us into my first question, which Megan and I were fortunate enough to be able to watch this race together, and we just felt like we were in kindergarten, and everyone was tattling on each other of these could-be infractions. I think I'm missing one of them that happened, but the two that I can remember are Bottas is not within 10 car lengths, and then when they were complaining about Max doing practice starts in the pit lane. So I just want to...
Oh, and then...
Yeah, I just want to talk about those.
I mean, and then you had Lewis being like, he got to change his tires. He gets to change his tires. And I'm like, dude, you've been able to benefit under a red flag as well. It's just the rules. We had no idea that session was going to be red flagged, which I think goes back to the FIA. They should have red flagged it from the beginning. If their reasoning was that we're red flagging this to fix the barriers, dude, did you see the crash? Did you see the pictures? The FIA's argument was they needed to get a crane out on track to be able to pick up that section of the barriers. If you knew you had to get a crane out to fix that kind of damage, don't even pull that bullshit of we couldn't tell. We couldn't tell we need... I could tell at home, and I'm not even a structural engineer. So that to me felt bullshit.
Yeah, like just red flag it immediately.
So there I kind of was like, okay, look, the tattling is annoying, but I also think the FIA fucked up and should have just red flagged it from the beginning. The Valtteri gets to do this and I can't do this. Max got to do that and I didn't get to do that. And then I just want to hear the radios. Like, I think there was at one point when Red Bull got handed, where it was in the negotiations, but Red Bull was like, "Are you investigating this? Are you looking at Valtteri and the car lengths?" Like, what?
I already said it. It just felt very kindergarten-y. It felt very childish, and I think this is the first time where we're seeing the pressure on these two drivers. I could feel it, like radiating off of their bodies and off of the cars. Just that we need everything, and we're going to take everything, and so we're going to try to tattle on everything.
I mean, hell, we're this close. Both of these teams are so close to getting their driver championship and world constructor championship bonuses. I would probably be tattling as well. Because at this point, I can see how both sides are like, this year there have been unfair moments. We talked about this in our formation lap about the FIA. At some point, someone is always going to be on the losing end of a penalty, of an incident, unless they determine to be a racing incident like they did with Checo and Charles. But I mean, this just felt petty. Petty.
Felt very petty. Which I'm going to bring us into my next question because it kind of goes along. Again, another question about penalties.
Oh, God. I know exactly what you're talking about now.
And this question actually stemmed because one of my friends, Jack, texted me after it happened and was like, have you ever seen this before? So let's talk about the fact that the FIA was making offers to Red Bull over the radio. So it's the middle of the race. It's right after the second red flag session, and the FIA gets on the radio with the Red Bull pit wall and is like, hey, I'm willing to offer a third place start for Max when this race starts back up. And I think I was the only one who heard it right the first time of, yeah, he's starting in third. And the Red Bull pit wall was like, wait, can you say that again? I just want to make sure that, we'll be starting in front of Ocon. And the FIA was like, nope, you're going to be in third.
Okay, so I first have to start with saying I went back and looked at the radio messages. Michael Massey got it wrong. He said, I'm willing to offer you P2. And I was like, what? What? Hi. That's like being a parent and telling your kid who's just like hit another child, I'm willing to offer you time out before I refer you to God, like before I refer you to, I don't even know, like the priest, like what?
Do you want to pick your offer before I hand over a penalty? I personally have never seen that before. I don't know if there's ever been that before. I'm sure some point along.
I can't find it. I looked, I cannot find it. I spent like 35 minutes looking last night. I can't find it. I don't think they've ever done that. I don't know. and this is the only thing I could think of, is because it was such a dumpster fire and they had so many things to sort out, was this Michael Massey's attempt to avoid, waiting forever to get an answer to just like start the race again? That might sound like I'm defending it. I think it's stupid.
Yeah, I think it should have been...
The rules are the rules. Read them. Lando Norris, literally after the race, I don't know if you saw this interview, was like, send me a PDF of the rules. I'm going to just edit and delete and send it back to you. And I was like...
I love that.
Maybe we should. Because that incident, the incident where Michael Massey offered the negotiation and then gave Red Bull time to think about it.
Yeah.
And then Red Bull clarified, and then Michael Massey finally accepted. He was like, no, P3, Ocon, Hamilton, Verstappen. Red Bull's like, we need another minute.
Yeah.
And Michael was like, we'll give it to you.
It should have been an order, not an ask. It should have been, hey, Max is going to start P3. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Yes.
Not, hey, are you okay with that? Are you all right with that? Is that going to work out for you? Is that going to work out for your race strategy? Because if not, then I'm willing to offer something else.
That is, to me, the moment where it felt like the FIA was against Lewis. We even kind of talked about it. I was like, at the point that the FIA are willing to negotiate what works for Red Bull, that feels like they don't want Lewis to win this race.
Yeah.
What's weird to me, and this is where I don't understand it and I want to do more research, and I'm hoping Michael Massey will have to do like an interview or something, is I thought the whole point of the negotiation with Max gaining the advantage going off track, I feel like that negotiation should have been more severe then so that it wouldn't have happened again. Like, if the negotiation had never happened and they had just handed him a 5-second penalty at that point, then I don't think this would have been an issue on lap 37, which I think is the point of there being rules.
It felt like, let me give you yet another pass to help you. You're completely right. We saw it happen again, which then led to that 5-second penalty, which could have, you're right, it could have just been addressed at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of me thinks that might be what Max is so annoyed about, is that things just don't make sense. I mean, the FIA is back to being consistently inconsistent, and it's almost a sure bet that every situation is going to be handled slightly different.
Right, which gives the teams no opportunity to prepare. It gives them no opportunity to then immediately say, okay, we're getting the 5-second penalty for overtaking off track. Here's how we're going to have to deal with it. Not, oh, let's sit around and wait and figure out how the FIA is going to handle it so that we can figure out how to handle it. I think the FIA has been confusing. I guess what I'm trying to say is if the FIA is so confusing that the fans are confused, then I can't imagine how the drivers feel.
Yes. I mean, I was genuinely confused at multiple points during the race. I mean, we were arguing. It was our family watching, and none of us could understand what we thought was going to happen. As a fan, this race felt very confusing to follow, which is why not only have I watched the race highlights, I pulled up the full race and watched parts of the full race, and I'm going to still watch the race in 30 minutes because I don't actually know what happened. Hell, Toto Wolff in his interview in the post-race was like, I'm not going to comment because I need to watch it again tomorrow.
And you're right. I'm gonna circle back to what you said earlier. It takes them a while to come up with these decisions. And I remember at one point they came out with the 5-second penalty and we're like, okay, wait, which was that for? I feel like they also aren't clear in their communication of, okay, here's the incident, here's what happened, here's what the penalty was. And this whole race just felt like a clusterfuck.
I mean, it was insane how Twitter just, like, destroyed the FIA afterwards. Like, they just went in on them. But, and I think this is part of, like, a bigger conversation this year about how involved should the FIA really be. They are supposed to be the body that ensures that racing can continue safely and fairly. And it does feel like they kind of have overstepped this year. Just a touch. I wouldn't necessarily say that I disagree with any of the penalty decisions this weekend. I think it was fair to give the 5 seconds. I think it was fair to give the 10 seconds. I will be honest, Max Verstappen was not in Max Verstappen form this weekend. It was clear that qualifying put him in a bad mental headspace going into the race. I think the pressures are finally getting to him. Hell, they didn't look at each other on the podiums.
No, Max actually walked off and didn't celebrate, if you missed out on that. Which, to do that, I think you've got to be feeling the pressure. And even we saw Lewis Hamilton went and sat down and had a moment. I know they were dehydrated and it was a very hot race, but they all took a moment to cool off and gather themselves, because I couldn't even imagine the pressure of the wheel-to-wheel battles, the touching. That race in general took a lot out of both of those drivers.
I cannot agree more, because I think almost every single one of the interviews I saw, they looked pale, they looked covered in sweat, they looked exhausted. And a lot of them said that this was one of the hardest, if not the hardest race they had mentally, because it is so fast and the walls are there. Like 1 millisecond mistake and the race is over. So for the race that was supposed to be the shortest time-wise, the hardest mentally, the most focus required, ended up being a confusing cluster that left them, instead of it being like an hour and 30-minute race, it was 2 hours and 45 minutes of a lot of them not really knowing what was going on. I mean...
Yeah. Messy.
Okay.
Messy in general.
Very messy. I think this is perfect because we've kind of touched on it, but I really, really think we should dive into it. So there have been 4 times this year where a red flag has directly impacted the battle between Max and Lewis. In Imola, where Hamilton was able to change his front ring. Silverstone, where Hamilton was able to make repairs, without which he might have had to retire that race. Hungary, where Verstappen made repairs, again, where if he hadn't been able to, he might have had to retire. And then Saudi, where Verstappen was able to have that free tire change. So what are your thoughts on these red flag race defining moments? Should we change the red flag rules? General kind of open-ended question. You take it how you want to.
Yeah. In all honesty, they've both benefited from a red flag. And at this point, I feel like it's pretty even. Like, we haven't seen Lewis with 5 or 6 benefits and Max with only 2 or 3. They're both at about 2 benefits each. I will say it gets debated every time this happens that, you know, are you able to make repairs? Are you able to do this? Are you able to change tires? I think making repairs is one thing. I think changing tires is another thing. I personally am not sure quite yet where I stand on it, in all honesty. I think I need to really take a look at the season in totality and look to see if other drivers have changed tires in red flags and what that has done for their race, or what has that done for, you know, the race in totality. A lot of the drivers commented on it. Most of them think that you shouldn't be able to change tires. I think there's a line between, again, changing tires because you want to and changing tires because there's damage or the weather has changed or you have a puncture or whatever it might be. Maybe you're able to change tires if you've been on them for X amount of laps. Maybe you're not allowed to change your tires if you've been on them for another X amount of laps. I'm not sure where they could go with this to make it benefit everyone or make it not benefit anyone.
I don't think there's a way to prevent the red flags from not benefiting anyone. Regardless of what they change the rules to, people will make strategy decisions and other people will gain an advantage while you lose, or vice versa. I mean, Red Bull took a massive gamble by not diving into the pits when it was a yellow flag, because while I think we all kind of saw that there was going to be another incident coming up, that wasn't guaranteed. I do like that the red flags and the yellow flags require a change in strategy. I think it forces teams to adapt. It offers it offers race jeopardy. It makes things interesting. All of us, the minute a yellow flag goes up, is like, who's going into the pits? What's going to happen? How is this going to change the race? How long is it going to be? I don't fully want to decide whether or not I think this stuff should happen under a red flag. I do think that if they're going to allow changes under a red flag, there needs to be a quicker response from the FIA on if it is a yellow or a red. Because I do not think this moment was more controversial because we had a couple laps of a yellow flag and then a red flag. Whereas I'm going to go back and look at Imola and Silverstone and Hungary. I don't think it was that much of we had multiple laps and the ability for 9 drivers, including a double stack from Mercedes, to occur before they red flagged it. If they had started with a red flag from the beginning, all of the drivers would have benefited from it equally. So I think that is a function of, again, the FIA screwing up this weekend. You have to be more reactive. They had an unprecedented amount of marshals, from what I understand. They had marshals from Bahrain there as well. I mean, if you knew that those barriers had to be fixed with a crane, it should have been an obvious indication that you needed a red flag to do that, considering we saw the barriers messed up immediately.
Well, and not only that, but it was the same corner that Charles Leclerc had crashed into, and they had to red flag the session then. So it's kind of like, I agree in totality that I like what you said, like the FIA needs to be more reactive, and I think this is another one of those moments, just like the, oh, hey, I'm going to make you an offer, where it felt like the FIA was benefiting a certain team, and it came off that way. Again, I don't think that was their intention, but it comes off that, oh, here's a time to red flag so Max can come in.
I mean, truthfully, Helmut Marko, I don't know what the fuck you're saying at the point that you got a free tire change and before any of the real issues in this race. It was as a result of you getting the free tire change that you were in a position of potential, you had track position. Like, I mean, the first 2 things really did feel like they were pretty Red Bull heavy this race.
Yeah. And you reminded me of the third tattle. It's when Valtteri slowed down to allow Lewis to get into the pits for the double stack. Yep, that was the third tattle.
That felt really annoying. Bottas isn't going so fast. He's not going so fast. Why isn't he not going fast? So that means it was Hamilton. It was Hamilton who was the 10 car lengths. He's like, Lewis isn't 10 car lengths. Lewis isn't 10 car lengths. I'm sorry. They felt like children whining.
Which leads me to my last question. Should we be returning to this track?
Okay, I'm gonna just bundle this question in with my loser because I think I've made it pretty clear where I am on this thing. I think the FIA/Jeddah lost this race. They were the losers this race. This track is insanely fast, like insanely fast. I feel like I mentioned that almost to a point that people were like, "Shut up," when I was watching qualifiers, practice, and the race.
She did say it multiple times.
But I can't even say words. I don't know if it's the lighting. I don't know if it's the layout of the track, the flow, the fact that there are blind corners, the fact that it was a night race, the fact that it is the fastest street track and the walls are so tight. But this is the first time I've watched a Formula One race on TV and been like, holy shit, this track is fast.
Yeah.
It looked faster than Monza to me, which is the fastest track in the year. But this one looked especially fast. So, with that being said, I would love to return to Jeddah because it was such a fun track to watch. However, I'm going to 1000% agree with George Russell because after the race he said, like, this is just not safe. And I agree that it is not safe. I think with the tweaks that Russell suggested and I think other people have hinted at, that this would allow there to be less incidents. It is the track was the loser because we didn't actually get to see a full race. We saw 2 mini races, one incredibly short, and then we saw a long stint at the end. So I think if they made those tweaks, made the track not as ridiculous, then the incidents wouldn't impede us from actually racing. Getting a full 50 laps. I mean, and really the FIA was a dumpster.
It's like if we can't even finish the race, there might be something wrong here.
Yes.
And if 5 cars DNF, there might be something wrong here. I think Sergio Perez said it best. It was after qualies. He said, if there was a reason for it to be this dangerous, then it would make sense. But there's no reason for it to be like this. And I think that was the point of the weekend where I was like, noted. We'll be very intrigued to see how the race goes. And then, again, look what we got.
What's funny that you mentioned that is that it's the point that I thought that this was going to become a problem was in FP3 with the whole Nikita Lewis thing. That Mercedes didn't even have enough time to let him know that Nikita
was in front of him.
That was when I was like, if the teams themselves cannot get the communications across that quickly, that's a problem. And then again, I feel like in the race when we had the Checo Charles Leclerc incident, like you're going from a wide turn and the track suddenly narrows. And if you're wheel to wheel, I mean, 3 going into 1 is just not going to work.
And clearly something has to be done about turn 21, 22, and 23, specifically 22, where we saw most of the incidents occur.
I don't know.
Most of the larger incidents occur. Charles Leclerc and
Mick Schumacher.
I
don't know. I mean, regardless of what me and you think, we're going back in March, and I'm hoping that they can make some small tweaks to make this less of a shit show. I mean, hell, that's going to be the second race of the year. If we have 5 people DNF in the second race of the year, how does that affect, engine allocations if someone really fucks up their power unit? How does that affect the chassis in a year where the budgets are getting slashed even more? The track cannot put the teams at like a disadvantage in terms of the equipment that they're going to be able to use for the next 21 races. Jeddah will be round 2 of 23. If we see this much carnage, that's a problem.
That much carnage that early in the season, we just don't need that. The drivers don't need that on their bodies. The fans don't need that on their minds. I know we're going back, but I'm already concerned.
I mean, on top of the major incidents, we had all of those minor incidents. We had Sebastian Vettel, who had bodywork flying off. Fernando Alonso was like, there's so much debris on track. This needs to be red flagged. Like, this is dangerous because a puncture into one of those walls, an uncontrolled puncture and car flying out of control will be a problem.
Yes.
I will say that I think it is important, and I think the media actually did a somewhat okay job is making the incident that happened in Formula 2 very clear that was not a result of the track, because you could already see it on Twitter starting to happen of people saying the Formula 2 race was reasons why we shouldn't return to Jeddah, and that was just a car stalling.
Yeah, that could have happened anywhere.
I wonder if because that happened so close to this race, which is why our first initial race start was actually relatively calm. I don't know if the drivers were a little like, ooh, let's pull it back. I don't know if it was in their head. I do know that they both are okay. They were both taken to the hospital. More information on, if they're even going to come back for the rest of the season. But just feel like shit's got to be done about this track.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm going to hit up our last question. Currently in the Old Man's Award, the Overtaking Award presented by Crypto.com, Sebastian Vettel is leading at 127 to Fernando Alonso's 125 and 121 of Kimi Räikkönen. Is this the title fight that we really want to see? Is this the fight that everybody wanted but we haven't had until now?
I think it's pretty cool in totality when you look at it that we've got 3 of the great drivers. Like, they've all been world champions at one point or another. They all are still incredible drivers. They're all still in Formula One. Kimi's leaving next year, but whatever. They seem to be having a good time with it. Vettel and Alonso were joking about it in the Thursday press conference, I'm pretty sure it was then, about like, oh, we're starting, at the back of the grid. Should we really go for this and really try to overtake as many people as we can? I think it has brought a level of, I don't want to just say fun, but I think it's just been a fun addition to the championship, the dramatic championship that is happening for the World Championship. Like, we've got that going on that's very drama-filled, very pressure-filled, and then it's like, okay, wait, but we also have three of the greats battling for an overtake award. I feel like it, lightens up Formula One a little bit.
I think it does, too. I had this thought when I was reading about the overtaking award. I want to see, a banner on the screen of, who's got the overtakes, because we didn't see many of the overtakes other than the Max and Lewis shit. I mean, it happens every time. It is what it is. I've gotten to kind of accept it. But I would love to see, a box inside of a box. Yes, show me the title fight happening. But if there's one of these, Old Man Award winners doing overtakes, show that on the screen and, have an actual ticker on the screen of, okay, Seb's at 5 this race, Kimi's at 2. That to me would be fun. Have the 3 on the side. I would like that more than some of the other crap that they show.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it would add to it as well. I'd love to see that next year, especially the race to race breakdown, because right now it's just we're getting all the totals, which we could look that up, but it'd be nice for that to be up on the screen. You're exactly right. And I want to segue because you brought it up. Speaking of missing out on overtakes, I want to talk about my winner because it's Valtteri Bottas, and they didn't even show his phenomenal overtake with Esteban Ocon to take third place.
No, they did not show it happening.
I don't know if you remember me yelling at the TV, Lewis is going to win, show us what else is going on. And then it happens, and then we're like, oh my God, it happened, but we missed what was going on. So whatever, we missed.
Then we had to wait for the replay. We had to wait for the Sky Sports to decide.
Valtteri is my winner of the race. It was his 100th start for Mercedes. He took podium. His facial expressions were pretty funny up on podium when he's standing there next to the two who I'm sure you can just feel the sexual tension between Max and Lewis Hamilton up there on the podiums.
It was not sexual.
Not sexual.
It was I want to murder you. At one point, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if Max just, got up and, decked him. I wouldn't be surprised.
Max has grown up. I always have to argue that with Megan. Max has matured. I don't think he's going to be decking anyone. He still has a way to go, as do most men in their young 20s.
I just mean the look on his face was I am pissed. The tension was so thick that you could have just broken it with a finger. You don't even need a knife to cut that tension.
Just a finger to cut it.
Even a dull fingernail would have gotten through because it was that thick. I was ugh. And what was so uncomfortable and made it even thicker was that there was just so much random shit happening at the end too. We had the drones, and then we had the fireworks, and we had the light show, and we had the dancers, and I was like, can we just get this over with? Let's just be done, because we are all so done with this race.
Yeah, which we saw when Max was like, I'm done and I'm headed out, which I totally get it. I totally understand.
I wouldn't have wanted to say if there wasn't champagne either. I mean, it's not champagne now. It's made from Italy, whatever. But I care about that, but no one else does. I would have left too, though. Why stay? You're tired, you're dehydrated, and you're not even going to get to drink a little booze to, calm down. I'd be like, peace out. I'm going to go. This was cool, Saudi. Not.
Which, my loser is actually Max and Red Bull. I'll just say it now, but it's pretty obvious. Max had an opportunity to put himself further in the points. He lost out on that. And then Sergio Perez DNF'd. So all around, just not a great day for Red Bull's fight for the championship. Yeah, my winner and loser are pretty straightforward this week because I had to because there was just way too much other shit going on. I had to keep it basic.
Correct. I mean, I kept mine basic. My winner is Mercedes. I mean, front row lockout after qualifying. Lewis is now tied with Max in the championship. Katie and I predicted it, just like a lot of other people. We're going to Abu Dhabi technically tied on points, but Max is ahead due to that extra win. Valtteri got the podium on that exciting last lap with that last second overtake on Ocon. I mean, he also had a really good overtake on Ricciardo after being stuck behind him for a bit. We saw the wheel-to-wheel at the end where Valtteri overtook him, but we missed it going back and forth for a couple of laps, which was annoying. And now Mercedes is firmly ahead of Red Bull in the constructors. So great day for Red Bull. My losers were the FIA and Jet. I already said them. I ain't going to go back to that. I'm done.
And I think we gave our honorable mention to Esteban Ocon, especially in that second restart, because if I was next to Max and Lewis at a second restart where they're right behind me and I'm in first place, I would have been shitting my pants. And then to have...
I think I would have just, like, driven off track. Like, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to get out the way.
I'm gonna just let you guys find me. I'm not going to get involved. But, you know, he did a nice job staying out of their way and getting around them and all of that. And so I think... And he fought Bottas for a while. He kept Bottas behind him for a while. Great defense. So I think he gets our honorable mention.
1,000% agree. I mean, he had some great moments when it was him, Max, and Lewis into the corners. For both of the two times that we saw the three of them go into turn one. I mean, he had a great race. He was holding on. I think his tires at the end just weren't there. But, I mean, that could have been podium number 2 in a row for Alpine, but they take home P4, which I think is very impressive considering I don't really know if people thought... I don't really think I thought that Alpine was going to have a great weekend. I think the only potential other honorable mention I was contemplating was Danny Ricciardo because he ended up P5. He broke that 3-race, 4-race kind of disaster in the triple header and then into Qatar. So he would have been my only other potential, but it definitely goes to Ocon this weekend. It was an impressive drive, and I think it really shows that we don't often talk about him, but he does have some massive skills and can use them when he has the car and the track position to be effective.
Agree, 100%. Nicely said.
Bet.
Something new that Megan and I want to do is the hidden gem of the week, which a hidden gem in my life is basically when you find something really good in a new city, like your new favorite sushi spot or whatever it might be. And I think the hidden gem that we have to talk about this week, we're going to try to keep it off track, is Vettel organizing a karting event for women ahead of the Grand Prix. Megan, you want to talk a little bit more?
Yes, absolutely. So despite major women's rights reforms in Saudi Arabia in recent years, women still face discrimination in the country in relation to their personal freedom, economic freedom, marriage, divorce, family decisions relating to their children, child custody. Things are moving in a forward progression. We have seen that women are now able to obtain driver's license since 2017, but Saudi Arabia faces many criticisms specifically in regards to women's rights reform. Formula One has faced accusations and conversations about sports washing surrounding the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix with spectacle, pizzazz, drones, lights, in a way to kind of cover up and distract from the controversy of the rights for women. Both Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel have been very outspoken on this issue. It's unfortunate that more drivers on the grid are not more outspoken. This is a platform for them to actually affect change off track. But both Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel have been leading that march to starting the conversation.
Sebastian Vettel went on to say that it was a memorable experience for him and he enjoyed helping these young women build some confidence. Some of them had driver's license, some of them didn't, some of them follow F1, some of them don't. So he said that things do have to be improved and have to be addressed, especially when you look at them through a Western or European lens. Things are changing, and for those people, it makes a huge difference. He went on to say, I think it was important for me to get to know these women. I think it was very memorable and inspiring day and a great way to kick off the weekend. As I said, focusing on the positive. And Sebastian Vettel has once again shown us how great of a person he is this year. And so that had to be our hidden gem of the week. Up next is the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix on the Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, UAE at the newly redesigned Yas Marina Circuit. The 58-lap race takes place on Sunday, December 12th for round 22, the finale of the 2021 season. Construction began in May of 2007 and the track was finally completed in October of 2009. The same year, the track debuted with the Formula One season finale where Sebastian Vettel of Red Bull beat out his teammate Mark Webber to win the inaugural race. The 2021 race will have a different design as it has been modified ahead of this weekend. These changes come as a result of complaints last year that the venue was less than spectacular. The track was shortened to 5.28 kilometers and had changes to 3 areas of the track. In turn 7 with the removal of the chicane before the hairpin, in turn 11 to 14 with the removal of the 90-degree turns to 1 long banking turn, and in turn 17, 18, 19, and 20 with the widening of corners to create a flowing sector. The goal of the redesign is to increase the overtaking opportunities and create a more competitive but exciting race. Mercedes dominated the track from 2014 to 2019 with Lewis Hamilton winning 4 times and both Nico Rosberg and Valtteri Bottas winning once. Max Verstappen ended their reign in 2020 with a Red Bull victory. For the first time in 47 years, we are heading to the final race of the season on level points. Lewis and Max are tied at 369.5 points, and the last time we saw this was in 1974 between Clay Regazzoni and Emerson Fittipaldi, who were tied at 52 points. We cannot be more excited and somewhat relieved to finally know after this weekend who will take the World Drivers' Championship. Tune in this weekend to see how the 2021 season ends and join us next Tuesday for our race recap.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us at Dirty Driving Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
Until next time, stay dirty.